There's a specific kind of silence that comes right before applause. Tight. Suspended. Like breath before a punch. That's the silence I stood in when they called his name. Marcus Lane, Chief Technology Officer of Helix MedTech, walked onto the stage at the Geneva Biomedical Conference to receive the Global Innovation Award. He adjusted his cuffs like a politician, smiled for the cameras, and stood beneath a 30-foot LED screen displaying the crown jewel of our company, the Predictive Load Integration Engine, PLIE. My engine. The applause rose like a wave. I stood near the back of the auditorium, just beyond the circle of spotlight. My badge still said Senior Systems Engineer, though these days I mostly debugged code I'd written from scratch 5 years ago. Not that anyone remembered that part. As the MC praised Marcus's visionary leadership and technical brilliance, the screen behind him flashed to a schematic diagram. My diagram. I knew it by heart. The corner still had my original annotation, scrawled in red, prioritize pulse lag before signal overlap, test in ICU environment only. I had written that from a vinyl chair in room 308 of St. Augustine Medical, while my mother slept 2 feet away, dying. She passed the next morning. That schematic, drawn on the back of a surgical menu, was the last thing I ever showed her. Now it was displayed behind Marcus like it had never belonged to anyone but him. He began his speech, confident, polished, corporate. This technology was born not just from code, but from vision, a vision shaped by leadership, by long-term strategy. Leadership, strategy. Not once did he mention the sleepless nights, the testing failures, the way I'd torn apart the integration module after the beta nearly shorted a hospital server. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just stood there, listening to a man thank everyone except the woman who built the bones beneath his crown. The screen faded to a Helix MedTech promo video. Marcus's voice, pre-recorded, played over shots of medical teams using PLIE. Great inventions are never about ego, they're about vision from the top. I exhaled quietly. That was the moment I knew. They had taken everything but the silence I still owned. Some humiliations don't explode. They press in slowly, like water under a locked door, quiet, steady, impossible to ignore. I stood just inside Marcus's office, holding the quarterly report in one hand. My performance metrics were clear. Record uptime, 3 hospital integrations ahead of schedule, 2 new modules deployed without a single rollback. My department's numbers had outpaced the rest of Helix MedTech for nearly 5 consecutive quarters. I didn't want fireworks. I wanted recognition, a raise, something. Marcus didn't look up as I entered. He was thumbing through Slack on his phone. "Michelle," he said. "Great timing. I was just reading that comment thread about your last deploy. Solid work." "Thanks," I said, careful to keep my voice even. "Actually, I wanted to talk about compensation." That got his attention. He looked up slowly, lips tightening just enough to register it wasn't the conversation he'd expected. Or wanted. "A raise?" he said. He leaned back in his chair. "Walk me through your thinking." I didn't flinch. It's been 5 years. I've consistently exceeded performance goals, led cross-functional launches, trained every junior hire. The system we're running, my code is still the backbone. He nodded slowly, like I was a student who had almost passed, but not quite. "Michelle, you're exceptional at what you do. No one's arguing that." I waited. The but arrived on cue. But raises at this level aren't just about performance. They're about strategic value, big picture thinking. I felt my jaw tighten. "And 5 years of technical leadership isn't strategic?" Marcus gave a small chuckle, like we were sharing some private joke. "It's tactical. There's a difference." I didn't laugh. "So when does tactical get rewarded?" He stood, smoothed his vest, and picked up his espresso cup. "Michelle," he said, voice syrupy. You're valuable. You make the engine run, but not everyone's meant to steer the ship. That was it. No plan, no path forward, just a pat on the head and a smile. I left his office without saying another word, back at my desk. I opened my old drive. I needed to feel like something still belonged to me. Scrolling through project archives, I stumbled across an old file I hadn't seen in years. Final draft of Adaptive Load version 1 patent document. I opened it on instinct and froze. Filed March 3rd, 2018. Inventor, Michelle R. Adler. Owner, individual. I remembered now. Filing it that weekend. The same one I spent in a hospital chair, saying goodbye to my mother. I had forgotten it existed, but they hadn't taken it. Not yet. It's strange what your brain chooses to remember. Not the funeral, not the eulogy, not even the scent of lilies on the hospice windowsill. No. I remember sitting cross-legged on the cold tile floor of my apartment. 2 a.m., face blotchy from crying. Laptop balanced on a stack of unopened mail. Fingers hovering over the USPTO website. It was the weekend after my mother died. The apartment felt hollow, like the air had been vacuumed out, along with her voice. I hadn't spoken in hours. The fridge hummed louder than my own thoughts. I wasn't working. Not really. I was trying to stay upright, and somewhere between grief and numbness. I opened the patent draft I'd written months earlier, an early version of the adaptive load engine that would later become the foundation of Helix Medtech's core system. At the time, I didn't even think it was ready. It was messy, barely tested. Just lines of code and diagrams scribbled on napkins and notebooks and the back of takeout menus. But it was mine. So I filed it, not under the company's name. Under mine. Michelle R. Adler. Filed as an independent inventor. I remember typing that part twice, unsure if it was even legal. I submitted the application at 2:46 in the morning. The confirmation email pinged seconds later, and for the first time in 3 days, I exhaled. I'd lost my mother, my compass, but I'd done one thing right. I'd anchored something, planted a flag in the middle of chaos, and said, "This stays mine." Now, years later, back at my desk, staring at that same PDF, final draft of Adaptive Load version 1 patent document, the memory came back with startling clarity. I blinked against the burn in my eyes. My hands trembled slightly as I scrolled. The signature, the filing ID, the timestamp. It was all there, and suddenly, the feeling of being small, voiceless, disposable, began to shift. I opened the company's internal IP records database. My heart picked up speed. I searched by document ID, by filing date, by system keyword. Nothing. No transfer agreement. No IP reassignment. Not a single line tying my name to theirs. They had taken credit, taken revenue, taken accolades, but they had never taken ownership. I stared at the screen, the file, the proof, the past. It didn't feel like victory. Not yet. It felt like a whisper in a quiet room, a soft voice saying, "You're not powerless." And in that moment, for the first time in a very long time, I believed it. I didn't rage. I didn't scream. I didn't post cryptic messages online or vent to a friend over coffee. I just went home, changed into an old hoodie, and opened my laptop. There's a specific kind of silence that comes after humiliation, a sobered, sharpened kind of stillness, not empty, but focused, like the hush right before the storm touches down. That's where I was. The confirmation of my individual patent hadn't felt like victory. It felt like a matchstick, small, breakable, but bright enough to see the path forward. So I walked it. I rented a private cloud environment under an anonymized billing alias. I spun up a Linux container labeled Hope is Quiet, a name that felt more like a promise than a joke. I installed every security patch I could think of, encrypted the directories twice, and renamed the instance as something as harmless as I felt, system tools, BIC. Then I started rebuilding, line by line, brick by brick, a new version of the same adaptive engine, rewritten from the ground up, modular, more secure, scalable across multi-institutional networks. I'd learned from the first version's flaws, from late-night bug hunts and deployment breakdowns. This time, there would be no patches, no shortcuts, no team leads redlining features they didn't understand just to make a deadline. This version was mine. Again, but cleaner, sharper, untouched. The process wasn't fast, but it was pure, quietly powerful. Every Slack ping from Marcus, every hollow compliment, every skipped recognition ceremony, I turned them into code, into focus, into fire with direction. And for once, I wasn't working for promotion, or praise, or to prove something. I was just building. That's when the email came. The subject line was blunt. Confidential inquiry, product alignment discussion. I almost ignored it, but the sender caught my eye. Lena Park, CEO of NeuroQuant, a medtech startup I'd heard of in passing. New, small, but aggressive in the AI diagnostic space. The email wasn't long, just a few sentences. We've been exploring infrastructure solutions. A recent IP scan flagged a signature match between one of your published prototypes and our internal need. Can we talk? I reread it twice. No threats, no assumptions, just curiosity and interest. They had found my fingerprint somewhere in the Git trails, the paper trails, the remnants of my first version, and they wanted to talk. I closed the email and looked back at my terminal. Hope is quiet was still running, CPU usage steady, logs clean. I wasn't panicked. I wasn't afraid. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't even angry, just ready. And in that moment, I knew I was no longer Michelle Adler, the employee. I was Michelle Adler, the architect of something no one could take from me again. Trust doesn't always come from years of knowing someone. Sometimes, it comes from the way a person reads your work, like they've read your soul without needing permission. Lena Park didn't offer a handshake. She barely blinked as I stepped into her office, glass-walled, minimalist, just a single whiteboard filled with equations and system architecture sketches. She nodded toward the chair across from her desk and said, simply, "Let's see it." I handed her the encrypted drive without a word. She plugged it into her laptop and opened the files with the kind of speed that only comes from living in terminal windows. I sat across from her, trying to appear calm, but my fingers tapped an unconscious rhythm against my leg. I had no idea what I expected. Suspicion, skepticism, maybe even indifference, but not this. Lena's eyes didn't widen. Her jaw didn't drop. She didn't gasp. She just stared at the screen, then started scrolling faster, diving into the folder structure, source files, deployment logs. Halfway through the encryption layer, she paused. "This comment style," she murmured. "It's yours?" I nodded. "Wrote every line." She kept reading. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in the room. A tension broke. She wasn't just reviewing code. She was recognizing it, like finding someone's fingerprint in fresh concrete. Finally, she leaned back. "This is the spine of Helix Med's architecture. They call it proprietary," I said. Their CTO renamed half the modules and stripped attribution before launch. Her jaw tightened. Just barely. "Of course he did." That was it. No disbelief, no hedging, just 2 lines of code, and she knew. Knew what had been taken, and by whom. I felt something loosen in my chest. A knot I hadn't realized had been tightening for years. "It was filed under my name," I added. Voice quieter. "Nah, I never signed an IP transfer. They never even asked." Lena closed the laptop gently, like it was holding something sacred. She sat still for a moment, thinking. Then she said one sentence, quiet and controlled. "We'll make them pay, quietly. Not out of vengeance, Not with drama, but with precision. The kind you bring to surgery or war. I didn't cry, I didn't smile, but I breathed. For the first time since HelixMed took what was mine and wrapped it in someone else's name. I felt seen, not as an employee, not as a pawn, but as a creator who had been stolen from. Lena didn't promise revenge. She promised action, and for once, someone meant it. Betrayal doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes, it arrives in a subject line. Urgent. Unauthorized access attempt. Internal review in progress. I opened the email in the dim light of my apartment. Coffee going cold on the windowsill. It wasn't just addressed to me. It had gone out to the entire company, every department, every desk. Every Slack DM now had a new context. Michelle Adler. The saboteur. The message came from Marcus's office, wrapped in HR-approved language. We are currently investigating an internal breach involving proprietary code. We have reason to believe a former employee engaged in malicious replication and attempted exploitation of HelixMed property. Former employee. I hadn't resigned. They had already erased me. My Slack account was dead. My email bounced back with user not found. Calendar access revoked. VPN credentials locked. I tried the admin shell I'd used for years. Denied. It was like I had never worked there at all. A few minutes later, the press release dropped. Helix MedTech has identified and neutralized a potential cybersecurity risk tied to the unauthorized distribution of confidential infrastructure assets. The suspect is no longer affiliated with the company. Suspect. No name. But everyone knew, and in case they didn't, someone leaked an internal memo to a tech blog by noon. The article had my initials, my role, my last 3 project names. They'd turned me into a ghost and a threat in the same breath. I stared at the screen. My jaw locked tight. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just let the cold settle in, like ice on the back of my neck. It didn't matter that it wasn't true, that I'd built half their system by hand, that I still had the patent filing to prove it was mine. They were faster, louder, dirtier, but I wasn't broken. Not yet. I walked across the room and pulled out my old external drive, one I hadn't used since my early dev days. Inside was the last known build of version 1.0, full log history, timestamps, personal commits. My fingerprints were all over it. Still, the lockout stung. They had taken everything except what they didn't know I still had. Or so I thought. That night, I got a message through Proton Mail from an address I didn't recognize. anondev432@mail.com. Subject, still here. The message body was only one sentence. They forgot to remove the backup root access. Same credentials as before. Do what you need to do. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed in the string. Breath held. The terminal flickered. Then opened. Access granted. User root logged into Helix Tools Secure System Vault. Access. Full. Unfiltered. Untouched. I didn't rush. I didn't strike. I just watched. The betrayal had come fast, public, loud. But retaliation? That would come quietly and surgically. Retaliation doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes. It wears a suit, files through the front door, and signs its name with a legal watermark. At 6:08 in the morning, an email landed in the inboxes of HelixMed's senior leadership. The subject line was clean and formal. Immediate action required. Unauthorized use of proprietary technology. Patent 10-776-432. The sender? NeuroQuant's IP litigation team. The inventor? Michelle R. Adler. Filed March 3, 2018. Status: active sole inventor. Independent ownership. I didn't press send. Lena did. The full weight of NeuroQuant's legal and intellectual property division moved like a scalpel. Swift. Precise. And aimed straight at Helix's exposed arteries. The body of the letter cited multiple instances of patent infringement and unauthorized commercial use of proprietary code. It was civil, professional, lethal, but the attachments, that's where the bleeding started. Attachment 1, a high-resolution scan of my original patent filing, complete with my signature and timestamp. It showed exactly what Helix had claimed as their own. Wasn't. Attachment 2, the commit history from the original code repository. Every line, every change, every IP address logged under my name, including comments Marcus had once told me to clean up later. Attachment 3, a Slack export from an old engineering thread. I didn't even remember this one, but someone had saved it, Marcus had typed. Casually, Michelle's back-end logic is gold. Just change the file names and strip the metadata. Nobody reads below the abstraction layer anyway. And then, the final piece, the twist I hadn't expected, a Zoom recording from early 2019. In the video, Marcus leaned back in his office chair, smirking at a junior product manager. She never signed an IP transfer. Who cares? We're the ones scaling it. She should be thanking us. The transcript was highlighted. The audio was clear. The arrogance was unbearable. By 8:45, internal chat logs at HelixMed were flooded. A junior engineer I'd mentored years ago messaged me, "They're freaking out. Legals everywhere. Dev leadership pulled into emergency sync." I didn't reply. By 10:02, I was trending on tech Twitter. By 11:30, NeuroQuant posted a public statement. "We stand by independent creators. We believe in ethical innovation. Enforcement measures have begun." They never named me. They didn't need to. My name was on the patent, on the commit logs, on the paper trail they thought I'd forgotten to keep. HelixMed, in a panic, began scrubbing their online presence. Dev blogs disappeared. GitHub contributions were set to private. A white paper published in 2021 vanished without explanation. Even a podcast interview with Marcus, where he once said, "This load distribution engine came from years of in-house vision," suddenly returned a 404 error. They were unraveling, digit by digit. But I wasn't celebrating. This wasn't revenge. It was restoration, not retribution with flames, but with receipts, not rage, proof. The truth doesn't always come out in a courtroom. Sometimes it leaks. Slow, deliberate, and devastating, until even the most carefully built lies begin to buckle under daylight. By Thursday morning, the lawsuit had gone public. Tech blogs caught the scent first, then mainstream outlets. Within hours, headlines flooded in. Startup darling HelixMed accused of IP theft in landmark patent dispute. Whistleblower code sparks legal firestorm between former engineer and 4B medtech firm. Who really built the system saving lives? Inside the battle for ownership. I watched it all unfold from the quiet corner of NeuroQuant's temporary war room, a repurposed WeWork conference space downtown that Lena had jokingly dubbed HQB. The walls were lined with legal printouts, code diagrams, and an industrial coffee maker working overtime. Next to me, Matt, NeuroQuant's VP of Strategic Ops, was fielding back-to-back calls. He was ex-IBM, sharp-eyed, always scribbling something in shorthand. He paused long enough to glance at my screen and say, "You're everywhere." I gave a half shrug. "Not my doing." He smirked. "Sure, and the engine rebuilt itself too. Right?" The real shift didn't come until 10:21 that morning, when Fairview Medical Group, one of the top 5 hospital networks in the country, quietly announced their migration to NeuroQuant. No press conference, just a soft banner on their website and a tweet that said, "We believe in ethical tech, proud to partner with NeuroQuant for next-gen diagnostic integration." That was the earthquake. I refreshed my inbox. There it was. A message from Lena. Subject line: Check CNBC. I clicked the link. Marcus was on live TV. CNBC's midday segment had labeled it "The IP Crisis Behind the Code" and split the screen. On the left, footage of me walking into a conference hall from 3 years ago. On the right, Marcus in a wrinkled gray suit, seated in front of a bookshelf that looked hastily staged. His voice was tight, stretched thin under PR coaching. HelixMed has always valued its engineers. We are shocked by the allegations. We see ourselves as the victim of a misunderstanding, not the perpetrator of misconduct. He didn't blink, but I did, because in that moment, I remembered another room, smaller, warmer, the company's third-floor kitchen, back when there were only 11 of us. Marcus handing me a slice of store-bought cake on my birthday, saying, "Keep building like this, Michelle, and your name will be on every floor of this place." Now he couldn't even say it on national television. My phone buzzed, a new Proton mail, from the same anonymous contact who had sent me the backup access code days ago. This time, it wasn't a message, it was a screenshot, a company-wide internal email thread. Subject line: Legal exposure, immediate action required. Below that, Marcus's name, his words: Desai's winning this narrative. Begin data purge protocols. Anything referencing the engine before 2019. Scrub it. Slack, Drive, Git. Clean it all. I sat back in my chair, stomach turning. Not from fear. From the pain of knowing that this man, the one who'd once called me family in front of a boardroom, was now trying to erase every digital trace of me, not just to cover his tracks, but to rewrite the story he thought I'd never have the courage to tell. Across the room, Matt looked up from a speakerphone call. "They're spiraling," he said. "They're pulling docs offline faster than we can archive them." I nodded, barely hearing him. My eyes were fixed on the screen, on Marcus's frozen face as CNBC cut to commercial. I should have felt victorious, and part of me did. But beneath the satisfaction, beneath the vindication, was something else. Grief. Grief for the version of me that once believed in that company. In him. In loyalty. In hard work. In some imagined meritocracy that would reward those who built instead of those who took. But that girl was gone, and in her place sat someone who had finally learned how to fight back. With truth. With silence. And with proof. The kind of proof that no spin, no PR team, no frantic deletion could bury. Destruction doesn't always come with sirens and fire. Sometimes, it arrives in calendar invites and balance sheets, in silences too loud to ignore. By the end of the third week, HelixMed was a shell of its former self. 70% of their clients had canceled or paused contracts. Two major healthcare systems that once championed their scalable diagnostic engine had quietly switched vendors. Internally, whispers turned into closed-door meetings. Then the leaks began. Emails, Slack threads, entire Jira ticket histories, flooding Reddit and private tech forums. The real blow, however, came from the money. Eden Capital and Arcton Ventures, two of HelixMed's biggest backers, announced they were pulling their investments. Eden's statement was surgical. "We are reevaluating our position in Helix MedTech in light of recent revelations regarding unlicensed intellectual property and internal governance failure." No anger, no drama, just the withdrawal of oxygen. That same morning, I received a text from Matt over at NeuroQuant. "Check Helix's SEC filing update." I did. And there it was, tucked in a footnote. As of this filing, Marcus Lane has been removed as Chief Technology Officer, effective immediately. Reason cited: failure to disclose known legal risks pertaining to core architecture. It wasn't an apology, but it was close enough to an admission of guilt that even the media didn't bother sugarcoating it. Helix CTO removed amid IP scandal fallout, headlined on TechWire. CNBC followed with, From Visionary to Liability, What Went Wrong Inside Helix Med. Meanwhile, my inbox exploded. Old colleagues, old interns, even rivals I barely knew were reaching out. Some congratulating me, some apologizing. One former product manager wrote simply, You were the engine. I'm sorry it took this long to say it. But the message that struck hardest came from Jared Bloom, one of Helix's first senior developers. A quiet man. Always wore the same gray hoodie. Always chose function over praise. He posted publicly on LinkedIn. I watched Michelle build this system from scratch. She was erased for being humble and too trusting. They stole from her. And now, no one can deny it anymore. Over 12,000 reactions in under 24 hours. I didn't comment. I didn't repost. Instead, I packed a carry-on and headed to TechMed Global Summit, the industry's most anticipated annual conference. Now buzzing with anticipation after NeuroQuant's rapid rise, Lena insisted I speak. I'm not a keynote speaker, I told her. You are now, she said. They tried to delete your name. Time to give them something they can't erase. The night before my panel, I stayed in my hotel room, wide awake, watching the city lights flicker below. I didn't rehearse. I didn't write bullet points. I just sat there, thumbing a small black USB in my hand. It had one file, a folder titled Founder's Proof. Inside were all the things they thought I wouldn't keep. Patent filings, version control logs, engineering diagrams, voice notes from 2018. A digital paper trail no PR team could spin. The next morning, I walked out under the blue and white banner of TechMed. Heart pounding. The room was full. Investors, engineers, journalists, probably a few of Marcus's friends still pretending not to know me. I stepped behind the podium, plugged in the drive, and took a deep breath. I didn't open with bitterness. I opened with memory. 5 years ago, I submitted a provisional patent from a hospital room. I wasn't a CEO. I wasn't even a manager. I was just someone trying to protect what I had built. I paused, letting the silence settle. They told me the vision belonged to leadership, but the code, the architecture, that was mine, still is. No applause yet, just stillness, focus. I lifted the USB slightly and added, I call this the Founder's Proof, not because I own a company, but because I finally reclaimed my name. That was when the room stood, and for the first time in 6 years. I stood with them. I never thought I'd see him again in person. But there he was, Marcus Lane, standing in the middle of the Innovation Gala ballroom, under a chandelier too bright for someone who used to hide behind committees. He still wore the same smug posture, but the suit didn't fit quite right anymore. The luster had faded. Or maybe it had never really been there, just borrowed light. He caught my eye across the room, drink in hand, smile already forming. Maya, he said, like we were old friends, like nothing had happened. You win! I tilted my head slightly, measured, unreadable. This wasn't a game, I said. He hesitated, looked around, as if realizing how many banners read NeuroQuant and how many lanyards had my name on them. Then he lowered his voice. I made a mistake. Back then, I should have taken you seriously. I sipped my drink slowly. You didn't make a mistake. You made a decision. He didn't have a reply for that, but someone behind me did. A young engineer, maybe 24, wide-eyed, awkward badge angle, clutching a notepad, loud enough for others nearby to hear. He asked, Hey, is that the guy who stole your algorithm and laughed when you asked for a raise? Marcus's face froze. A few heads turned. A ripple of whispers followed. He left without another word. I didn't follow. I had somewhere else to be. 10 minutes later, I walked onto the stage. The same stage where Marcus once accepted an award that should have been mine. Now the spotlight was different. Now it was mine. "This isn't a story about revenge," I began. "It's about reclamation, about taking back what they tried to erase." I held up a small USB drive, same one I carried since the beginning. "This is proof. But you don't need to have a drive like this to matter. You just need to keep building. Keep remembering who you are, especially when they pretend to forget." Thank you for watching this story. If it resonated with you, tell us how in the comments. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that fight back.